It's one of our signature project, and it's on a great note because Fahame will speak about a paper that got accepted at a prestigious conference called the International Conference of Information Systems. It's also on a sad note because for a while it might be Fahame's last presentation, as Fahame is about to join Deloitte next week. So for all of us, thank you so much for what you've done, and congratulations. And we talk about this after your presentation. It's a great postdoctoral capacity here in the room. And online, thank you for joining us. And particularly, thank you so much, Mary, for joining us from New Zealand. I hope you're well. It's great to have you here. Having said this, why don't we just jump straight to the topic? There's a whole paper behind it that can be circulated, can be read in detail. This will be presented in December at ISIS. For those who don't know Fahame, had done her studies here, got her PhD in 2007 from us within information systems, and more recently moved from information systems to management, stayed on campus and extended her previous work around processes and data and other aspects into the domain of trust. And it's quite amazing how within a few months you went from early insights into trust to getting a paper accepted at the most prestigious IS conference. So well done and congratulations. So hand over the microphone now to Fahame, who will take you through our co-authored paper, where we try to work out how do you manage trust with a focus on a design theory and a number of design principles, and you give us some insight. So warm welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll have a bit of farewell celebration later. Thank you, Fahame.
Thank you, Michael, for your introduction. Yes, this paper is a collaboration work with Michael, and Michael has done, just to give you a background, Michael has done like this research with retail sector about trust, and there was also a white paper written when I joined CFE at that time, based on those studies. And basically what we try to do is to bring those insights from industry into form of a scientific paper. And this presentation is showing the results of that. So we developed a design theory for trust based on those interviews and also the literature we have done. And I'll explain steps briefly in our presentation. So why we study trust? We are living, so this is the first question we need to answer. And we're living in an environment, socio-economical, technological environment that is creating lots of emerging issues about trust. So trust concerns. There are new technologies. There's online transactions, but the customers no longer they have control on their data. That creates privacy concerns. They don't have control over the transaction, and these are creating trust issues. On the other hand, we have trust opportunities. New business models and technologies are creating opportunities that didn't exist before. We have, for example, like industries like Uber, Airbnb, they have created new form of trust, or they have used new platforms to create new forms of trust building exercises. And these opportunities and trust concerns all call for more research on trust and how to leverage these opportunities that exist in the market. On the other hand, when we look to the literature on trust, we identified that there is a huge literature on trust. Trust has been studied widely in all disciplines and across many disciplines for many years. But one of the observations we had in these studies that these studies are mostly focused on explaining trust, so the prescriptive theories on trust, explaining what is trust, what is the relationship between trust and other concepts. And there are fewer theories or studies that have a prescriptive approach to trust that explain how we can actually build trust. And that's why one of the main purpose, main aim of our paper is to develop a design theory, which is a prescriptive theory to build trust.
I want to minimize this.
I can do it.
Try to do. Sorry.
To build this theory, we also further investigated literature and we identified that, well, there are studies on trust and there are a few studies on, especially in design science, on how to design trustworthy IT systems. But one of the other observations we had from literature that there is a lack of approach for building trust in the whole process of interaction of the customer with the company. There is no holistic approach on how to build trust, and let's focus on the whole process of building trust into processes. We talk about trust in systems, we talk about trust in people, but how we can build trust through the whole process of interaction when a customer is not only engaging with one system, one person, one process, but they are interacting with a variety of IT systems, a variety of processes, and a variety of resources, how to build trust there. So to scope down our theory, our research is focusing on building a holistic approach to trust. So how we can build trust between a company and customer, considering the whole interaction and variety of IT systems and resources that they are interacting with. In IS3's literature, trust and IT system have been studied, and there are two main approaches in these studies. One approach is basically focusing on designing trustworthiness IT systems, and they basically build trust to the system, how we can have more trustworthy automation, how we can have more trustworthy finance system or websites. And there are other sort of studies that they look to how features, mostly in e-commerce study, how features of a website can improve trust. In this paper, in our research, with the purpose of developing a prescriptive theory to build trust through the whole interaction process of the customer with the company, we use both approaches, technology both as a trusting and also technology as an enabler of trust. And our approach is basically developing building a design theory is also has some specific and essential activities, but there is no specific sequence. And the whole idea is that you go through these activities in an iterative, abductive manner. So you can see here that to build a design theory, we have like two domains, abstract domain and instance domain. Abstract domain is the literature with existing theories, and instance domain is where you find the problems, where in our study is the retail sector, where we did interviews with CEOs of retail sector. So the purpose was here to go through iterative process and identify the solution to build trust in a holistic way, and moving between instance domain and abstract domain, and developing a design theory to build trust. In the abstract domain, as you see, we have existing studies and triangulation of studies, which in design science they call it kernel theories. And on instance domain, we have the interviews. And the purpose of interviews basically was to identify what are the trust issues in these companies and what are mechanisms that they use to build trust. Obviously, the interviews didn't only mention mechanisms, IT-enabled mechanisms, but our focus in our study was identifying IT-enabled mechanisms. So I go through each stage. So in the abstract domain, as we said, we identify the problems as lack of a holistic approach to build trust in the literature and also in practice, and that there is not much of trust literature also on how to build trust into the processes, into the whole process of interaction of a customer with a company. In the first step to build a solution on the abstract domain, we needed to define what is trust, what are the components of trust that are relevant to our study. So we started with this definition of trust, that trust is trust as confidence and trust is trustworthiness to perform specific action and achieve certain outcomes under the situation of uncertainty and risk. So I go through elements of this definition to show how they lead us to the solution on abstract levels. So risk and uncertainty are the precondition for trust. In any trust interaction, we need to have risk and uncertainty, otherwise we wouldn't call it trust. Trustworthiness is the property of trustee, a person who trusts and gets involved in interaction. And trustworthiness attributes are the attributes of a trustee that make them capable of doing a specific action that's required by the truster, and also reducing the risks and controlling uncertainties for the truster. So when a truster gets involved in a trust-related interaction, they do this evaluation of the trustworthiness capabilities versus risks and uncertainties that they exist. And if you assume that's a whole logical situation, then they make a decision to rely on this trustee. The other component of this definition is confidence. Confidence is less calculated aspects. Confidence is where people don't really assess risk and trustworthiness, but they have assurance. For example, when you know that whenever you want to buy a coffee and you tap your credit card, it's going to be paid. You know that's a confidence. You don't need to assess anything every time you're going to do that. We have confidence in this financial system. We have confidence in gravity. We know we can walk, because there is a gravity. And so confidence is a platform to build trust, basically. There is less evaluation to it. And people have confidence in education system, in health system, in regulatory systems. And when people have confidence in one agent, or let's say one system, it makes it easier for them to trust another agent, to build the trust calculation and trust another agent. So to build trust, to build our theories, we focus on these two elements of trust definition. And we want to identify how to build trustworthiness of the trustee and how to build confidence in a truster. To be able to do that, on the abstract level, to identify the solution, we need to identify the requirements to build trustworthiness and to build confidence. We first started with literature to identify what are these requirements that we can derive from literature. To identify the trustworthiness requirements, as I mentioned earlier, trustworthiness is related to risks. When a customer gets involved in an interaction with the company, they are exposing themselves to some risk. And we identified three types of risk that could be applied in a variety of contexts. So when a trustee gets involved in interaction with a truster, the first type of risk is the main objective of the interaction wouldn't be satisfied. So they want to buy something and they get something that they don't want. So that's the main objective. The other one is something happens, and the other type of risk are that something happens and they waste their money, they waste their time as well. And the third type of risk is related to the other objectives, other values that a customer or a truster has that is not that related to the main objective of that interaction. So in any interaction, there is a risk to all these there is a possibility of all these types of risks. And according to that, we identify requirements to address those risks, reducing. So the first type of risk related to the main objective of interaction, we call them systemic risks. So reducing the systemic risk, reducing customers' vulnerability if something happens, and reducing risk to customers' values. Also, in confidence, we identified that people have confidence in majorities of opinions, so building, that's one of the requirements. Confidence in experts and regulatory systems is another type of confidence as requirements, and building confidence in technology, using technology as well. So there are another requirements for confidence. On the next step, on the instance domain, so that was our abstract domain, literature review. That now we go to interviews. So I said that we did interviews with 10 CEOs of 8 companies, and the objective of these interviews was to identify the mechanisms in a form of design principles. So this is the format of design principles suggested by Gregor et al. 2020. So each design principle has aim. Here our aim is building trust, obviously. User is a customer, implementer is a company. Context, it depends to that sort of mechanisms that you identified, but it's retail sector in general. And we wanted to identify mechanisms and enactors of those mechanisms. Here we have rational, which we use again in sort of abductive approach. When we identify mechanisms, we use existing literature as a justification for that mechanism, why that actually helps to achieve our goal, and we use some examples as our evaluation stage of these design principles. This is one example of one of the design. We have 10 design principles in total. We identified 10 design principles in total, and this is example how we presented them in the paper. So each design principle, the first, like this one, is reducing information asymmetry between customers and the company. And the context, we identify 4 mechanisms for these design principles, the reasoning, and we use an example to show how this is applied in industry as well. So to show you that this figure is showing the more holistic picture of what we identified. So as I told you that trustworthiness and confidence, that's our objective. We want to build trustworthiness and confidence through we identified an initial set of requirements in the literature, but through the interviews, these arrows, that the 2 head arrows, they show that there is an iterative process between the interviews and theory building, the abstract level. So through the interviews, we added to the requirements that we identified earlier. And we identified in total 23 mechanisms and abstracted these mechanisms into the format of design principles that is like this, and 10 design principles that satisfy 10 requirements to achieve, to build trustworthiness and confidence. Finally, this is the design theory that, so as I mentioned earlier, that our purpose is to build a design theory. And this is also the elements, the main elements, 6 elements of a design theory suggested by Gregor and Jones in 2007. And so each design theory needs to have a purpose and a scope. So for this paper, our design theory purpose is to building trust systematically into the process of customer interaction with the company. The elements of the construct of our design theory are the requirements and trustworthiness and confidence. The design principles that we identified in two groups are principles of forms and function. That's another part of design theory. And that these principles, these mechanisms, they all should be applied they can be applied in different contexts, but obviously in each context they need to be revised, they need to be studied and applied in the context that is proper. Like this is a holistic approach, and for a specific context, obviously there should be further studies to understand how these mechanisms and design principles suit to address the requirement of those specific contexts. And the propositions that we build this design theory or design principles based on them is improving trustworthiness in relation to existing or relevant risk. It can positively impact the decision by the truster, and providing a relevant source of confidence for a truster positively impacts their decision to trust a trustee. And also we provided through the study, and for each mechanism in each design principles, we provided justification based on existing literature to why these mechanisms are going to satisfy the aim of that design principle. For future work, so as I mentioned earlier, so this is a holistic approach, and the design principles and mechanisms are on high level of abstraction. And as in any design theory, like even mechanisms can be further broken down to design principles. So what we suggest here, every mechanism in each design principles further can be broken down to other design principles and mechanisms that is closer to implication context. Also, this is the data that the instance domain in this study is a retail sector, even though we did abstraction, but they're relevant mostly to retail, and for any, like to adapt it to any other context, definitely there need to be some justification and changes. And we also, one of the, I think, very good reviews that we got from ICIS reviewers was that there could be synergies between these design principles and mechanisms. And I think that's a very interesting area that could be investigated in future using experiments or field studies to identify how applying one mechanism can influence on applying another mechanism, or even the other mechanisms could be even relevant or not. And also context, like a specific context has plays a significant role here. So in each context, not all mechanisms and design principles are going to be applied in one context. So each context requires investigation to identify what are the proper design principles and mechanisms that could be applied. And also we use for the showing the registration of the design principle and design theory, we use existing examples from our interviewees or also other retail firms, but obviously more evaluation of the design principles and design theory could really strengthen the contribution of this paper. Thank you so much, and yeah, thank you for being here today.
Fahame, well done. Stop showing slides and then we can see the whole lot.
No, just stop here. And then okay.
So, yeah, sorry, Jenny, you will start Jenny at Ghana online. You have to talk to the microphone.
Okay. Hello, Fahame. I don't even know you yet, but hello, I introduce myself, Janine. Wonderful presentation. I love the design theory approach. I know nothing about it, but it's so exciting and so full of potential. I'm going to ask you about one of your slides, the one with the columns, and on the far right there was mechanisms. And I'm interested to just understand a bit more about what the mechanism is compared to the
Design principles.
Design principles. Part A of the question, and part B is you talked about technology being either, it can be a mediator in trust. I'm interested about the mediation role as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So for first question, the differences between mechanisms and design principles. So design principles are a combination of elements. Basically, when you have a design principle, it identifies who are the actors, who are the implementers, who is the enactor, and all what is the context, what's the aim. So it combines all the elements that you need to understand what's going to work for who and for what. And mechanisms are more actions, structures, and I'm basically telling the definitions that I have seen. The actions or structures that can be done by those enactors, by those and implementers to achieve the aim for the user. Okay. So they are actions or structures or
Can you give one example to make it clear?
Yeah, let's do one. So yeah, I can do it from here. So one of our design principles here was reducing information asymmetry between a customer and a company. And the mechanisms we are talking about is performance transparency. So IT systems make the information about the performance or quality of the products available to the customers. Okay. So basically that's more action. And the design principles include different elements that shows how that action is going to work.
Okay. All right. Yep. Good then. Thank you.
And your other question about the role of IT as a mediation. So I think that's a lot in e-commerce literature as well, and IS literature as well, that studying how, for example, a design of a website can improve trust that customers have in the company. So using and many of these studies focus on the main channel that the customer is directly engaging with, which is the website. And so identifying how customers like, I don't know, the color or what are different features of a website can improve the trust that they have in a company.
That's nice. There's a lot of parallels there with the notion of knowledge as practice and how you can share knowledge by sharing practice with an object, for example, a technology or something, as the mediator.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. I like it. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Edgar Bria here. Thanks very much, Fahame, for that interesting presentation. It's actually a new topic to me, the design approach and trust. So a combination of the two is very interesting. So I guess I just have a very general questions. Just a couple of questions. So the first one is that the way I perceive it, it's the way the design framework and all that is structured is in a way to explain or improve the trustworthiness between the retailer and a customer. So I was just thinking about, for example, a platform where you have multiple orchestrators and multiple customers. So do you think your framework actually applies to those sort of multilateral trustworthiness in that sense? So that's the first one. And the second one is about, I was also thinking about how can this be applied in the area of AI? Because there's a lot of, it's a popular topic today, in terms of how the level of trust that customers are actually getting from a system where the decision is made not by human but by a machine, and also in terms of the data. The data the machine uses to produce an insight or whatever. To what extent that data is protected and it's not going to be used to other things that is not adding to the value of a customer. So I'm just thinking, in terms of that AI environment, you think this is applicable?
Thank you.
And so your first question about if there are multiple types of users that using the platform. We are focusing here mostly on customers, but I think the main part of the theory that we're developing, that identifying trustworthiness and improving trustworthiness and confidence, can be applied to any stakeholder. Different mechanism, obviously, to improve trustworthiness for like a partner, supply chain partner, rather than a customer. In terms of trustworthiness and in terms of building confidence, different mechanisms would be applied. But I think the main elements, the main shape of theory would stay the same, but the content would change.
Yeah.
The second question, and I like that in relation to AI and trust, what we are proposing here, I guess, it means that trusting AI only, like it's not, so we don't build trustworthy AI system. It's more than AI. If someone needs to trust AI, is again a combination of people, resources, whatever exists behind that AI system. So it's a collective. It's not just trusting the data or decision making so it's not just trusting the technology of AI, but also the company behind it, and also the other resources and processes that someone interact with, rather than just trusting AI itself. So I think that's applicable to AI in that sense that even if for AI you need to consider all these interactions and the whole trusting the whole interaction and all parties that someone would be involved with.
First of all, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. It was inspiration for many things I now suggested to Tiger and our SP3. And I think you touched point many actually doubts we were not sure where to look, especially that it's not general trust in technology, it's actually trust that technology is enabling different mechanisms. That's a really good point. But I was wondering, did you already finish analyzing all the interviews you conducted?
Yes, that's right.
So what would be the main outcomes that are tangible and applicable in the industry that you are taking out from that analysis?
Well, I think that the whole thing, and Michael also has done the interviews, has better view than me. But I think what is evident is that, well, everyone thinks about trust, obviously, and also they believe that they have to do something for building trust, and they use different approaches. Some of them even they don't know that what they're doing is building trust until you ask them and you get there with them. And rather than what we found, like sort of identifying confidence, trustworthiness, and all these mechanisms that were implied. But I think the main message is many people in the industry, they're actively thinking about it, and they do many things. Sometimes they don't even know that's what they do is building trust. But when you start getting to those requirements and talking with them, they mention that, and that's interesting.
Thank you.
Artemis has a question for you on the chat.
So invite someone, Mary had a question as well, Artemis had a question. I'll ask them directly, so Artemis, or just ask them if you can share a question.
There are very many questions.
No, there's just chat.
Ask them, Fahame, just ask them, then they can
Artemis?
repeat their question. Artemis and I can narrate the question.
You can talk to me anytime. I'm saying hi, Bixby.
Sorry, I'm having technical problems.
Definitely.
Oh, we can't hear that.
She's a mute, but yeah.
Sorry, I'm having problem with my audio setting. I think I asked my question in the chat, and now I'm gonna mute so I don't create any more noise.
Maybe we should disable this number.
No, it has to come. Okay.
What about the speaker?
Speaker,
Yes, speaker.
That could be part of AI.
Yeah. Try speaking now.
Artemis?
Artemis?
Okay, so can you hear me okay now?
Quite low.
Sorry, I was getting a lot of echoing. So I thought I'll just mute so I don't create any more noise.
Can you just go back to the speaker?
So sorry, thank you very much. That's very interesting. And I guess my question is quite general to the approach, which I figure is a design science approach. And so I'm just curious that so this type of methodology, I guess, do those design principles have to be tested in a package for a paper to be, before you can publish the paper, or would the design theory and the design principles be enough in terms of the scope of a paper you usually do?
Usually, like in any design theory development, design science, there's an evaluation or registration stage that sometimes it's happening all iteratively when you are like even asking your interviewees. So it's basically going between the theories and the empirical domain, and that's your iterative evaluation. But yes, there is an evaluation involved, and it's not necessary implementation, but it could be expert views on the mechanisms and design principles that they approve it. And it could be like, this is a very holistic approach, and it's sort of impossible to really evaluate everything. But in like a lower level design theories and design principles, implementing is one approach to evaluation.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. So in your explanation of the design principles, would you need to provide some evidence of your iterative testing, or?
Yeah, what we did was basically we used existing examples for each design principles and mechanisms. We used existing examples that are there already in different industries or in the retail sector that we interviewed with as the early evaluation of our design principles. But yeah, it should be evaluated furthermore. And I think one of the best approach to further evaluate this design principle and mechanisms would be through maybe focus group with industry partners or interviews with some experts about them. That would be one of the best approaches. But for this paper, we had an early stage evaluation, which is through examples and showing the existing examples of mechanisms and design principles that are already working. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
Yes. Mary has left. Can I have a question asking if your paper has been published?
It is accepted, but not yet published. It will be presented at ICIS in December. So I think it will be accessible after that.
But you can circulate it now, yeah? So you're happy to share it?
I'm happy to share, but I don't know if it's okay. It's
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to share it.
Probably in terms.
Or maybe we can put it in an e-print as like early stage. Yeah. Yeah, I can put it on an e-print and then.
So, yeah. Thank you, Fahame, for the great presentation. So I was wondering, when you mentioned that technology can either work as a trustee, as an enabler, right? Or motivator, mediator. So while drafting your design principles, did you take technology in your list? For example, are your design principles are a combination of trust, creation, or management, and then role of technology in that? Part one of the question is that. And secondly, if you took technology while drafting your design principle, do you think that any kind of technology artifacts, for example, AI or blockchain, so whichever the artifact is, the main grounds remain the same? For example, the technology should not harm the customer, for example. There shouldn't be breach of data privacy or nothing like that. So, first question, I will just sum it up. First question is, did you take technology as an enabler or as a trustee in your design principles? And secondly, if you did so, do you think that technology applications can change? It can be AI, it can be blockchain or anything, but the main grounds will remain the same, like what you did so far. Like, is generic enough to cater all kinds of technologies, or it varies according to technology applications?
Thank you. Thank you. So first question, the technology is an enabler in this research. It's not a trustee. We use technology enabled mechanisms to build trust. The second question, if it's, so yeah, I don't think it's specific to any, it's not limited to any specific technology, because the mechanisms are saying we use IT systems to build this, and the technology already exists, but it could change, and the technology could be more advanced and still like facilitate that objective in an easier way, perhaps. But yeah, it's not specific to the technology as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Seems that we exhausted the conversations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was a great interaction because it was a great presentation and a great set of questions. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Fahame, for doing this. And thanks for joining us online. I appreciate this. I will circulate the paper. Maybe 2 or 3 comments. And that's so fascinating here. So this is one statement. We understand what trust is, but not how to deal with this. It's quite fundamental. And the notion of trust design is very, very specific about what we engineer trust. I think it's the unique contribution. The simple idea of that uncertainty changes the state of what you assess, blockchain, the driverless vehicle, AI, and changing the state of mind, confidence. I think it's at the core. So Edgar, to your question, could I look at AI? I could say yes, if AI is uncertain, then I change the state of AI. But if AI works great, you just don't trust it, then I change the state of mind. In terms of, is it generic enough? So don't cause any harm. So we talk about vulnerability. It's one of the 10 principles. So when you engage with this and it causes damage, what's the damage? So that's sort of managing the vulnerability. Whether it now means we don't resell your data, you won't be physically harmed, is a part of it. What the detailed mechanism is will vary. So the harm I could cause when you're in my driverless car is different to the damage I can cause when I have your private data. But the idea of don't cause harm or minimize the causation of harm is a generic principle, but the actual mechanism is then very specific. It could be for Amazon, if you order an item that you don't like, there's a 120% return policy. We put 120% of what you spend into your account as a voucher. Do you trust me now? That is the mechanism, 120%. The principle is reduce vulnerability. Is this clear? Yeah. And then Artemis asked about, just to clarify this, the testing. I think yes, we tested the design principles, but I think the work that Tüge is doing is sort of to contextualize them. Mm-hmm. I might say we build confidence by providing comparative rating. And that might be great when you go for pizza, but not sufficient when you buy a Tesla car. And so the boundary conditions, the context factors are unknown. We give you like 23 principles or mechanisms. At the moment, we don't know under what circumstances these 23 can be applied. So we believe at some point they all make sense. We just don't know at the moment for what product, for what person, under what circumstances. And if I can't cause any harm, I might focus on other elements. So I think it's maybe less a testing, it's more understanding the context factors when they make most sense. So you can see, based on the conversation, I think it's an exciting topic. And again, thank you so much for doing all of this. I hope that some of these ideas might also be relevant for you at Deloitte, whatever you would do at Deloitte. Thank you so much for facilitating everything in the background again, Lisa. So with this, I just like to say thank you to you, Fahame, for trusting us with the last 8 months of your life. So appreciate this, that you jumped into this, succeeded, and then that this work here was a bit of a springboard into other activities like Deloitte. We hope to stay connected, yeah? So we have the sort of CFE alumni wherever they are, other cities, universities, or in professional companies. So the